Hey guys, welcome to the engine. We've got a fantastic video here today. We are working on some modifications on Mr. Sagar Sheldekar's ZX6R. We are doing a fork oil change and modification, so it's going to be a little bit of a technical video with regards to what we are doing, why we are changing the fork oil, and the few modifications that we are making, how we got to that stage, with a lot of discussions from him, and what sort of results are we expecting and so on. So it's going to be a fun video. We've already got the forks out. Let's get into it. We are doing suspension. We've got a model of how the front forks work because I'm going to explain a lot of things to you. So people who are interested in all this technical lingo, please stay. People who want can skip to the future part where we actually do the fork oil change, right? So from what we discussed with Sagar, when he's aggressively on the brakes or entering a corner, he feels that the motorcycle is diving too much. We confirmed that with a travel indicator on the fork, and the fork was constantly bottoming out. Eventually what we want to do is get a stiffer set of springs so that it can support the pace at which he is riding. That is the ideal solution, but until we get there, there are a few other things that we can try. So here's a graph where we have displacement and force, and all of the springs that come in super sport motorcycles are linear springs. So I've got two spring options for you right here. You've got a stock spring which is at a lower rate, and you've got a stiffer spring which is at a higher rate, so two different angles, right? So if you are stuck on one spring, what you can do is add preload. So I can have my spring start here, which is called preload. So this is the starting point of my spring with the amount of preload on the front springs. On spring 1, this is the force that I am getting. Now when I want, the problem that I am getting is that I am not getting enough force when I am on the brakes. So what I do is I move this preload point to here, which gives me additional starting point and which gives me a higher force to support my weight. The problem with that is once this moves from here to here, the initial force that the spring is applying on the front suspension is a bit too high. So what that means is on the later part of shock travel, it will work better because I am getting more spring force, but on the initial part of stock travel it will not work as well because it will resist the dive of the motorcycle even more. In reality terms, what will happen is when I'm riding the motorcycles with much higher amounts of preload, one, my sag is going to go out of the picture, which means that my motorcycle will be difficult to turn in. So if you're riding through chicanes, the bike will be slower to transition from one turn to another turn, and basically you will have to wait to lift and drop the motorcycle, wait a bit for the motorcycle to settle so that it goes through the stroke, and then you can start again pushing on the motorcycle. This all impacts lap time. When we go to spring 2, which is at a much higher rate, the difference comes in the upper curve. So as this goes up, I am getting more and more feedback, which means I can lower my preload even more, because when my fork compresses, I am going to reach at a stage which is anyways much higher than this force, right? So I don't need that much preload as well. I can go even lower in preload, which means that with the same high force at full travel, I need to be at a much lower force at zero travel, right? So I still maintain my agility of the motorcycle without compromising my safety of the motorcycle under heavy braking scenario. Those are two springs. We cannot change springs now. Maybe we will in the future, but what can we do now? We need to figure out another solution. On your front forks, there are technically two springs which is there. This is your front, a simplified version, ugly simplified version of your front forks, right? You've got your main spring, you've got the green dots is the oil which is filled into the front suspension, and you have nothing here. This is air, which is called the air gap, right? Now what happens is when the suspension compresses, so does this air, because the air has got nowhere to go out, it is sealed. So this air pocket also compresses, right? When air gets compressed, it applies a certain amount of force on the outside and it acts as a spring. So this air gap is the secondary spring that you have, that you can use. Now the beauty of this is that with the conventional spring, right, if we add preload, the starting point at which my force is applied is fixed at a higher level because we've added preload. But when we have the air gap only comes into the picture when the fork gets compressed. So after a certain point of the fork getting compressed is when this air gap is going to come into the picture. Can I change the force of this secondary spring? Yes, I can, if I change my air gap level. So if I change my oil height from this to this, I have a bigger air gap, which means it has more room to flow, which means it is a softer spring. If I lower this air gap and increase the height level of the fork oil, I have a shorter space for the air to compress, which means it is a stiffer spring for us to use. So that is what we are going to be using right now, and we'll see what that sort of impact. So that's the theory behind it. Forks are out, let's get on to building them. So we're going to be very, very methodical with this. Usually what we do is we strip the suspension and we rebuild it as per the stock values. We have the stock values, but I want to confirm that the suspension was on the stock values, otherwise we'll be all off. So we'll be going very step by step, making sure everything is as per the stock values. We've already measured preload, so we were at 14.5 turns out of 21, so that's 2/3 of the way in. On the ZX6R we have independent suspension, so we've got preload on one leg and damping on the other. Both of them are supported by springs, but of course this is a much more stiffer spring. We go. We are at about there. So we are at about 88-89 mm. What we are going to do is, especially on the left suspension, we are going to try to experiment with higher grade, and I also want to figure out where we end up, where we have a hydrolock. So I want to know how far I am from hydrolock also. So we'll pour in a lot of oil, and then we'll keep slowly draining it out till we feel a hydrolock. It's very easy to do that on this is the right side fork. So on the right side fork we're at 97. So that's as dry as it can get. We are not rebuilding the whole front suspension because the seal, it's a 2025 motorcycle, the seals and everything are brand new, fresh, so we don't really need to change them. We will be upgrading them to better seals at a later stage, so one variable at a time. So yeah, let's talk fork oil. Fork oil is a very complicated topic because I mean, so is engine oil, but a lot of people don't understand the difference in viscosities. So when we say fork oil comes in different weights, you've got 5W, you've got 7.5, you've got 10W, you've got 15W. On some manufacturers, you also get 20W. The weightage is viscosity of the fork oil. In suspension, viscosity is not something that will measure the stiffness or the softness of an oil directly. What we do look at is something called CST or Centistokes. This is the measurement of how fast or how slow an oil moves through a small hole, right? And that's exactly what suspension is. That's how it works, right? Making sure that oil moves through a small hole. Now, viscosity will impact Centistokes, yes. So of course a higher number of weightage on the fork oil will be more stiffer, yes, but it's not a very precise measurement. Now, when we say 10W, the problem arises here. When we say 10W, whether we take a oil from Showa, which is what the manufacturer is, whether we take it from Maxima, whether we take it from Liqui-Moly, the Centistokes of all of these 10 weight fork oils will be different, which means your performance will differ. So if you're on a motorcycle where you don't have any adjustments especially, and you don't want to change from how the motorcycle feels, you have to make sure you put the same oil with the exact same Centistokes, or at least as close as you can, to get the same level of performance. This takes some Showa SS8 oil, which is 10 weight, which has a Centistokes of 35.6 CST, and we have Maxima 10W. This is supposed to be 37 CST, so only 1 CST off. That's not a massive difference. If you go to Liquimoly 10W is at 27 or 28 CST. That's a very big difference from 35, right? Which is why we are not going to Liquimoly, and we are going to Maxima, because it's the closest match that we can get to stock, and we don't want to add any more variable. So that's fork oil in short. We never go with measurement of fork oil unless and until the manufacturer has not given us a measurement of air oil height, or we've not figured it out. So we always go with oil height, because whenever you're draining suspension, this is still a very straightforward suspension where everything comes out, and the spring and everything come out, and it's just straight for the oil to come out. In a lot of suspension, there are internal cartridges which will hold some amount of oil in. So if you just add the total quantity of oil in the fork every single time, you're going to be incrementing it unknowingly. It's not a problem to increment, but you need to do it knowingly, right? So you will be incrementing it a certain bit. So which is why we look at oil height, right? And we don't care about the quantity. As long as the oil height is the same in the suspension, then we don't really worry too much about what the quantity is. On this suspension, we are measuring everything. So we are going to be putting, I'm going to be putting in, let's say 600 ml of oil here. That's actually 620. So we'll keep that in mind, and we will add 600 ml of oil, because I want to get it to a hydrolock state. Now, what is hydrolock state? I told you it's going to be a technical and long video, right? So hydrolock is basically where the air gap becomes so small that your fork, before it travels the full 120 mm, which is what this fork is rated for, before it travels the full 120 mm, it hits the oil, which means it cannot travel any further, because oil is not compressible. So it cannot travel any further, which means that you cannot use the full travel of your forks. And if you hit a really hard bump, it will damage your fork oil seals. We don't want to ride in that stage, but it is very important for me to know where the hydrolock stage is, so that when we increment fork oil height, we are not too close to that hydrolock stage. So I personally, whenever I do this, I like to do a couple of vacuum pulls first. So this is a vacuum pull, right? What this does is it creates a vacuum on top of the fork oil, and that will help with is getting all of the oil, all of the air which is trapped in bubbles inside the oil out, right? So a couple of vacuum pulls gets all of the air bubbles out of the fork oil to the top, and then I do a compression push that ensures that oil goes into every small cavities that are there inside the suspension. But the left fork was at 88 millimeters. It's right now at 79 here. Okay, so you've gone up 10.
Yeah. So this is what we found on the motorcycle, not
Yes.
the manual.
No, because we are changing fork oil based on what Sagar was feeling on the racetrack, and he was feeling what was in the fork. Also, the manual that I have is which I was discussing with him. The manual that I have is the 23 manual. We don't have the latest one because it's too new of a motorcycle for that manual to come out. I can ask the Kawasaki people to find it for me, but when I'll tell them give me fork oil height, they'll be stumped. What is fork oil height? So there's no point in asking them, right? So we're measuring this, and that's what I told him. I think Kawasaki has gone up 5 millimeters in terms of fork oil height over the years, or Showa quality control is really bad. Yeah, even I don't think so. you see, there's this cap, and then there are 4 holes on the inside, right? Now the oil is below that, and I have to measure the oil height with everything in place, which means I need to pass something through that small little cavity and take a measurement of where the oil height is at, right? Idea. We go. Okay. Are you sure this is showing 72 mm? So at 72 mm, we are not bottoming out, right? Let me add oil. So we are right now at 34. After adding that oil, let's see if it hydrolocks now. Yeah, that's a hydrolock. Okay. So 34 mm of oil height. We've started to hydrolock. I want to measure how much of a hydrolock we have. Might go a little bit more. I want to go top ladder first. We will try, please, once.
We went from 89 to 79, 79 to 50.
Abhi, this was 36, 34, what we just tested.
Oh.
Now I'm going down to 50 and see if it bottoms out. Oh, fuck, I can't push it hard enough to bottom out. I don't think we can push it hard enough for it to bottom out. We're down to 20 again. Try push. We will now set 70.
Okay.
Now I can go through the full travel, which means we will bottom out the suspension anywhere around 60 mm of oil height or lower. So anything lower than 60 mm, it's too much oil. We're going to hydrolock the bottom. Our target for this now is to set it at 80 mm. What we measured was 88, so we are going about a 10% increment, 8 mm, and going to 80 mm of oil height in this. With that, this fork will be done. We'll be doing the exact same 8 millimeters on that suspension, primarily because I don't want any variance in step and create any variables in the whole process. We can set them at different heights, but we don't want to do that to add any more variables to the suspension. So forks are back on. We've done a few installs. Apart from that, fork slider is on. The rear wheel's gone off to get the 90-degree valves installed so that it's just easier to check pressures when you're riding like a maniac on the racetrack. What else did we do? Rear spools. We put on rear spools from RNG. We have the only thing left to do is easy grip tank grips, which we will do once the bike is washed and clean and all of that. So yeah, that was quite a technical video on this bike. There is a lot that is going to happen on this bike in the future. We will cover all of that and all such technical stuff in future videos. We'll make a series out of it, multiple different videos. If you like what you see and if you want to keep up with what other work that we do, please subscribe to the channel, stay in touch. Comment section is all open for you guys to point out any mistakes that we did. And yeah, see you next time. Bye.